to hit the.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fun-filled edition of the Vito X DINO podcast. Dean, what's going on, man?
Hello, Vito. How you doing?
What- My energy was here, and you just had to go. You were about here. Bring it up more.
Yeah, well, I was going to try and keep it sexy, but I guess not.
Well, we can we start at 7, so sexy time is around 8:30. Let's just start up here.
Oh, okay. We got to dim the lights, and you got to close your bathroom door.
We'll explain that in a second to our guest. Speaking of our guest, let me introduce him. Rob Guillory is a New York Times best-selling Eisner Award-winning American comic book artist. He was born and raised and currently living in Lafayette, Louisiana. He's mostly known for his 8-year run on Image Comics Chew, as well as the hit book Farmhand, both from Image.
Well, you just said "add chew."
And Chew.
You just sneezed that title out, didn't you?
I stepped on. Everybody knows who Rob is. Let's not. Let me just finish this introduction. And Mosley from Boom Studios. Oh Christ, you're killing me, Dean. He's
Falling
also
apart.
had experience in
Falling
TV
apart.
developing Farmhand for AMC Studios. Welcome everybody to Rob Guillory.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Sorry about,
Thanks for coming on the
sorry
show.
about that intro.
It's good. Good. Keeps it nice and loose.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. Let's call it that.
No, keep that in, man. It's what humanizes us, Vito. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
come on, guys.
So,
You know it's
Rob,
not AI. This ain't no AI.
Rob, if you're new, since you're new to the show, I record in an office that's technically in a bathroom. So there's literally a
Okay.
toilet right over here to my right. It used to be
Wow.
behind me,
Wow.
but I got a new desk, so I have a new layout.
Mm,
It's literally right
wow.
there, staring at me.
That seems like a real missed opportunity to just put the desk right in front of the toilet. Like the seat is already there. Like why wouldn't you use the seat?
It almost
Uh,
came to that. The way this desk is, it's like a little longer on one end, like which is going to be on my left side here. So I had it where the shorter end was here, so we could see the toilet still, because that's now our brand. And
Mm,
um, it made it so that it was so long that you couldn't actually use the toilet, because we still do use the toilet.
uh,
Um,
hmm
but
hmm
yeah, that wouldn't have worked. But maybe a laptop, like a lap sized desk, right on the toilet
hmm
would be great.
but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do think to do a monthly book, you do have to sit on a toilet with an art table. I think didn't Jack Kirby do
Yeah.
that?
Did
Right? That was Kirby style. They call that Kirby style, right?
There's animal style, which is like a type of burger from In-N-Out Burger.
Right.
And after you do animal style, you do Kirby style.
And not only you don't get Kirby crackle, you get Kirby crapple.
Wow. This
Sorry,
is
guys. Sorry.
this is starting off on a real high point.
Welcome to our podcast.
Welcome to our
Speaking of
podcast.
podcasts and video casts, you have your own, which you haven't done in a while.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering why.
Yeah.
Why did you take a break from it, or was it just getting was it just
Yeah.
too emotionally draining, or
Oh man. So the YouTube thing, I started about a year ago, a year and a half ago or so, and I never. People have been telling me for years, "Oh, you should do a YouTube. That's the place to be." And I just thought it was the craziest idea. It's like I'm an introvert. I don't like that stuff. But then I just kind of felt like, uh, I just kind of felt called to do it. So I did it for about 6 months. Went pretty well. And I think at some point, honestly, I think I will go back to it. I'm definitely going to go back to it. But I think at some point I started realizing I have like all this work to do that like actual like comic work to do.
right?
And it was taking more time than I really wanted to give because I'm not usually one of these YouTube guys that gets on there and just starts kind of spouting off at the mouth randomly. Um, I tried to really think about what I'm going to say before I get on there. And I would make notes and all that kind of stuff. So I was just rewriting and just driving myself crazy.
Well, you
So I'm taking a
covered
break.
a lot of hard and heavy topics, so I can see why. Like it seems like something you
Hmm.
would want to devote more time to, probably, and probably that's why it was taking away from drawing, I would imagine.
Well, I
Yeah.
appreciated it, Rob, because I actually would listen to a bunch and would comment on there, and we had little tiny parlays through that. But
Hmm.
I thought it was really super important, and I could tell that you were taking your time to convey, and impart some kind of wisdom or ask some questions that maybe didn't
Mhm.
have actual answers, but it's good to ask the questions, and
Mhm.
I thought it was really important. But at the same time, I also could see how I think we did like 24 of them or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
And like that covers the gamut right there. So you got to take a
Mhm.
break,
Yeah.
and see how did you, energize your own work by putting yourself out there and having that kind of a conversation, like I'm
Yeah.
sure that actually changed some of the way you approach comics by actually talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to, as when we've been doing it as long as we've been doing it, I guess it's easy to just kind of get into autopilot. You're not really thinking about why or how you do things. You're just doing it because it's like a handwriting. Like, people talk about drawing style, and I think my drawing style is not really a style. I can probably draw easier than I can write my own signature. Like, it's just I know how this works. It's like muscle memory. So getting to do the YouTube thing and kind of break down, okay, this is how and why I pencil a certain way. This is how and why I break up a story a certain way. It kind of made me take a step back and really kind of break down what's really going on up here when I'm making this stuff. So it did, I think, revitalize some things for me. But it did, I think by the end of it, really what kind of killed it for me for the time being, at least, is I think I started feeling the tug of the algorithm. When you're doing this thing, I even took a YouTube class, like a little, a influencer, creator, content guy class for in preparation for the YouTube. And really, what they kept pumping was you got to keep churning stuff out. You got to keep feeding the algorithm, which means I have to come up with more and more stuff. And maybe I don't have more stuff to say. Like maybe I'm done. So I would find myself having to kind of stretch things a bit, and I didn't like how it made me feel, and I think
Mhm.
it wasn't coming from the heart at some point. So I just decided, it's probably best that I just take a break from it, go plow through all this work that's on my desk. Maybe I'll come back to it eventually. I think I will come back to it. I'm actually talking to a couple creator friends of mine about potentially changing the show and doing something more kind of open forum, like conversational. Um, because yeah, talking to yourself on camera for 15 minutes can be a bit much.
Yeah.
I listened to Bill Burr podcast, and he I think struggles with doing 50 minutes to an hour,
Yeah.
and he's doing it solo. So I totally can see how trying to have your own conversation with yourself, or
Mhm.
again, to impart some kind of wisdom, to monologue, can be difficult. And I don't think I would do that necessarily. I think I probably do it anyway naturally, but the minute there's a camera on you and you're going to put it out there, it changes the way you perform. That's what they
Yeah.
said when I went to film school, and one of the classes they were teaching was documentary, and
Mhm.
the teacher said, the minute you put a camera on someone, even in real life, they can't help but start performing or being aware
Yeah.
of the camera. So it changes
Mhm.
their behavior. The introduction of that camera changes everything. So I
Yep.
totally get it, and how that could be difficult. I could not do what I'm doing with Vito. Like
Mhm.
the thing that's cool about what me and Vito do is that it is conversational. And
Mhm.
the minute it starts start to feel like, oh, we have to be professional at this, I don't know if I want
Mhm.
to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because
Right.
there is a freedom right now
Mhm.
to just the way we're doing it, low rent style, guerrilla style, whatever,
Mhm. Mhm.
podcasting.
We're
And
we're
I
basically
did do a little bit of homework, but I don't even like doing the homework,
yeah,
Yeah.
we're basically just taking our phone conversations in front of everybody. Like
Right.
we're just
Right.
like that's really all we do. I think that's
Mhm.
the appeal of doing it with somebody is that you can and the funny thing is I don't know that Dean and I have ever really debated or disagreed on anything. Like we tend to
Mhm.
kind of I think there was one thing we disagreed on a couple of weeks ago, but it wasn't like contentious or anything like that, which
Mhm.
I think is one of the benefits of having like multiple people on a podcast is like you can
Mhm.
have different sides of an argument and do it, which when you're doing it by yourself you can't do because they
Yeah.
might lock you up. And uh, I think at some point Dean and I will eventually, I don't want to say we'll disagree on something, but we'll definitely come to blows on something because it's the nature of our friendship. Like we've done that
Mhm.
before.
But also, we don't
Yeah.
want an echo chamber,
Yeah.
we don't want to totally agree either, and
Mhm.
actually, the introduction of a third person also helps. So,
Yeah.
Rob, when you didn't write Chew,
No, I was the artist on that one with
but you write,
John Layman.
but you write Farmhand.
Yep. Yep.
Tell me about that transition.
Oh man. So I mean, before Chew, I was actually all the stuff I was trying to get picked up was all stuff written and drawn by me. So basically, like, it's funny. So I decided I had been going to Comic Cons since the early like 2001. So it took me about 7 years to really get a good footing in comics. And in 2008, you know, I just decided to go all in. You know, my wife and I had decided we were only married for a year at that point. We didn't have any kids. So we decided, you know what, now's the time. Let's just jump into this and go all in on comics. So I went to Comic Con. San Diego Comic Con was that month, and I'd been going for about 7 or 8 years at that point. So I decided I'm just going to go. I'm gonna kick ass. I'm gonna bring portfolios, get work. I'd already started getting a few gigs here and there. So I was planning to go and just hit it as a writer artist. And then the day before I flew out for San Diego Comic Con, I get this email from John Layman, who I didn't know him at the time, but I was familiar with his work. I was actually a big fan of Layman's work, and his work at Image Comics. I think in 2002 or three, he did a book called Puffed, drawn by a guy named Dave Crosland,
Yeah, I remember that.
who I was massive fan of Dave's, and I became a fan of John's work from there. So in a weird way, 2001, 2002, that's when I was in my first couple of years of college, and I decided, I think comics is what I want to do. Growing up in Louisiana in the 90s and the 80s, we didn't have Comic Cons here, so I'd never known anyone who made comics, so I didn't look at comics as a real job. So it wasn't until early 2000s I decided, oh, this is a thing. I think I'm actually going to pursue it. Um, so when I was kind of sculpting my style and all that stuff, John's book Puffed was one of the first books that jumped out at me. So my style, John was actually very integral to like my comic sensibilities, especially with comedy, which is weird because he's the guy on the book on Chew that ended up breaking me into the industry. Um, so yeah, he emailed me right before I flew out to San Diego. We met the next day at the Hyatt bar. He was a little drunk at the time. And he offered me Chew, and we started doing test pages like a month later. That kind of kicked off everything.
That's awesome. But then like you said, you started by trying to break in by writing and drawing your own comics.
Mhm.
But what really put you on the map is Chew, right? So
Yeah.
then at some point you decided I need to write my own comics. I'm not trying to
Mhm.
say there's any drama here. I'm just saying I
Mhm.
too started off as a person. Well, let me put it this way. I didn't have the confidence to write comics. Okay. So
Mhm.
for many years, I was always looking for writers and collaborating with writers, right?
Yeah.
And then I started to realize, wait a second, I am writing. You know why I'm writing? Because I'm drawing comics,
Yeah.
and image is text and it's story and it's making those
Mhm.
choices. And so a writer and an artist collaborating, they're the co-writers as
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
So I guess did you what I don't totally know your timeline, but was there a bunch of time between Chew and Farmhand, or did you
Mhm.
take a break and then
Mhm.
developed Farmhand?
Well, I mean, Chew ran for 8 years. So at the beginning of 2016, I just realized, holy crap, this is the year Chew was over. I should probably start thinking about what I'm doing next. And John, it's funny. I was kind of hoping that we could have kept the team together because it was just so easy. You know,
Hmm.
we had built-in success. We enjoyed working with each other. There's never any drama. But I kept looking at John, and I was like, "What you got? What you got?" And he's like, "I don't have anything." So, so I had to start scrambling. And this idea popped up out of nowhere in January 2016 for basically an organic farmer who grows human organs, which sounds kind of punny, but I liked it. And I immediately got, oh, it's got all the stuff that I like drawing. Like Chew had this really interesting, like comedy, but sci-fi and horror, kind of gross out. It could hit all these different beats, which is what I liked. I liked having the versatility of being able to just do all this stuff. all in the confines of one book. So Farmhand got that. I was like, oh, okay, I see what this is. And I just, I actually pitched around to a couple people. I was actually talking to Phil Hester at the time.
Mm.
Phil and I love Phil. Phil's a good dude. I had wanted to work with Phil forever. So I actually pitched Phil. I said, hey, we were just trading pitches back and forth. I said, hey, I got this idea for a guy who grows human organs. And Phil was like, that's a great idea. It's just not for me. I'm like, all right, crap. So Phil was the guy who just said, you should probably just go do this yourself. So I just decided to go all in with it. And I finished Drawing Chew November 1st, 2016. And about a month later, I finished the first script for Farmhand. And then all through 2017, I just worked on it. And then it released in, I think it was June 2018. So yeah, that's kind of the timeline. There wasn't much of a break.
Well, all right. So I actually had to write down something. I've written some questions that we'll have as topics, but there was something I wanted to write down about meeting you, and then I wanted to ask you this question. So let me find what I wrote here. Okay. So I was gonna say, I believe I met you at Image Comics Expo in 2018 when I was promoting the Red Hook and you were promoting Farmhand, I believe. You said something at your presentation that struck me hard. I'm paraphrasing here, but you talked about not knowing it was okay for a Black person to make comics, that you were raised to not consider comics, but instead become a doctor or a lawyer or seek a job that would elevate your status. I grew up with parents that encouraged me to do what I love, despite the fact that it was quite clear that comics could and would bring me financial strife and existential hardship. I've come to make many sacrifices in order to draw stories, and I have some regrets, but no one put a gun to my head to make comics. What convinced you to take the leap and make comics? And did I get that right, that you had said something like that at your presentation?
It's possible. I don't know.
I was just fascinated by that,
I never knew. I mean, for me, it's just the only thing that made sense to me. I started, I have memories of myself being very, very young, and my dad asking me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I knew art was probably what it was going to be, but I knew very, very young that it wasn't, I knew that there was a right answer. So I said something like, I scrambled, I was like, what's practical? What's a real job? It's like, oh, I'll be an architect. It was like, I had no desire to be an architect. I just knew that it was more respectable than saying I want to draw comics. But yeah, I mean, when I started college back in 2000, I went for 3D animation. So I thought maybe video games. It was kind of the closest thing to the comics thing. And then I got into it and I just hated it. I immediately saw, like, it took me weeks and weeks to create a character I could draw in like 5 minutes. Like, this makes absolutely no sense. So at some point, I just kind of went for it. I don't think I didn't have any other sense of anything else. I didn't care about anything else. And I also was probably a little naive. Like, I wasn't really thinking about how I was probably going to support myself. I remember when my wife and I got together, we went to college together. We were both painting majors. I ended up changing to painting, which is not, like, speaking of not having a plan for the future, becoming a painting major is probably like a pretty good example of this.
My girlfriend's a painter, and yeah, I thought comics were bad.
Right. But when we got together, she was one of the first people I showed my work to, and she said, and she wasn't a comic person, and she's like, "This is really good." And she asked me a question. She's like, "Do comic creators like make a living?" At that point, I didn't know any comic creators that were, even though I was going to conventions and stuff. I didn't really know anyone that was really thriving in it. So I was like, I think so. I think this could probably work out. But it was the only thing that I just loved it. I've always been a natural storyteller. I remember being, again, very young. I'm saying 3 or 4 years old, looking at my uncle's comics, and just fell in love with it. And it's always been here. So
it sounds like you were galvanized somewhat by your wife, which is awesome, because I'm sure there's been a lot of conversations between someone who wants to make comics and their significant other. And I have dated women that use the H word on me, and they said, "When are you going to quit your hobby?" And I'm like, "Have you met me?" Like, what are you talking about? You know? But
Right.
also, did your parents and your family also support you in this decision?
Yeah, yeah, they did. I mean, they didn't understand it, you know. I mean, they didn't. I mean, my family's very, very blue collar. I mean, my dad was oil field for like 20 something years. My mom has been, I mean, blue collar forever. We're just really hardworking people. Um, but they knew I was just kind of cut from a different cloth, you know. They didn't really know what to do with me to begin with. They were just happy, I think, that I wasn't like shooting people and selling drugs or something. Like, good. Like he's just in his room, like
Right,
drawing stuff. That's good.
right.
Um, I think when they started really taking it serious was when I was in college. I started going to Comic Cons, and you know, we drove. A lot of them were in like Texas and that sort of thing. But the very first one, we drove to California for Long Beach Comic Con
Wow.
in like 2005 or six or something. Eric Larson had just been made publisher of Image.
Hmm.
So we just decided to drive out there, me and three of my buddies. None of them are doing comics now. But we all just drove out there. You know, four sweaty guys in a rented Chevy Impala, driving 28 hours, you know, from Louisiana to Long Beach. And just, I came back and I remember my parents sitting with me late at night when we had just gotten back and saying, like, how did it go? I'm like, I think I can do this. Like, I think I gotten some great reviews, not from Larson. Larson tore me apart. Um, but he had some good feedback.
Right.
So at that point, I think they were all in. The only pushback I got was I was going to go to the Art Institute of Houston because you know it's art. It's an art school, and I want to make art, so that made sense. And I remember going to in a recruiting event with my mom. And my mom, we were sitting there with the recruiter, and the recruiter was just asking me all these questions. He's really, really into my art and all that stuff. And my mom is just, yeah, we're unable to hide our true face feelings. Like it's all right here.
Right.
So my mom just clearly was not on board. And I remember the recruiter saying, looking to my mom and saying, you're not on board with this, are you? And she's like, no, I'm really not. And she's like, well, why? He's like, well, because he's not just an artist. Like he's a writer. Like he has all these other skills that are just going to languish if he goes to this little art college, you know.
Wow.
And she was correct. She was
Yeah.
absolutely correct. So I enrolled at my local university, University of Louisiana in Lafayette. I was there for 5 years, and it was good for me, you know. And on top of that, I met my wife there. So it ended up being absolutely good for me.
That's
She
But they were
saw
on board. They were fully on board.
she saw more in you than recruiter did. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
that
totally.
reminds me. I don't know if I said this to you before, Vito, or said this on the show since we've only done like 13 of these now. But when I was very young, my parents noticed, oh, he likes to draw a lot, like very young, kindergarten, first grade type thing, like drawing, spooky clowns or something. I don't know what the hell it was. But they went to my teacher, whose name was Mrs. Friend. Come on, can't
Mhm.
do better than that. Um, and they were like, "Well, Dean looks like he could draw. Like he's into this, and he seems to have a skill set or a talent or something. Do you think that we should take him to, hire an art teacher or, have him some lessons or something?" And Mrs. Friend said, "No." And we're like, "Why?"
Mm,
He said, "Because he's so young and unbridled and raw, and like
well,
all he'll do is start to copy the way the teacher shows him how to draw." And
mm.
that's why I grew to be a terrible artist. That's why I draw the way I draw right now and write the
Yeah.
Rob,
things I write because Mrs. Friend fucked me up, man.
Rob, I wanted to
No,
ask you a question because you were talking about your art style a second ago, and as I was looking through your work from way back, I feel like I remember your name. I could be misremembering. I could, I'm old enough to start, senility, but I feel like I remember your name on like digital webbing or pencil jack or
Oh
something
wow.
like that. Is that accurate?
I well, I mean, on the message boards, sure. I
Yeah.
was never published by them, but yeah,
No, no, yeah.
yeah. So like when I it's weird. I was pretty strategic. and like how I wanted to break into comics. So, which is weird because it was really the only area of my life that was really strategic. But I remember the plan was at the time when I was in college, I was drawing. I was a senior cartoonist in my school paper, and I did that for 5 years. Drew like hundreds of comic strips, and taught me how to meet a deadline. First paid gig I got, and I decided that every 6 months I'd hit a Comic Con and I would have a new portfolio, get a new review and everything. But on top of that, I would post because I was doing like 2 weekly comic strips for the paper. So I would also post them online at a few different spots. So one of them was like Dark Horse Comics message board, the Image, I think the Image message board, maybe Jim Mafood's message board because I was a huge Jim Mafood guy. I think Digital Webbing was one of them. But yeah, I was just hitting it repeatedly every week and just kind of building a network that way.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was on there. They've
So-
never published me, but I tried.
Well, because you had talked about your art style a few minutes ago, and as I was looking at your work, and I thought I remembered you from back then as well, and like obviously you're not the same artist you were back then as you are now, but I was trying to, I couldn't, I couldn't see an obvious influence. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a you and Scotty Young both have a similar aesthetic. I wouldn't say style, but like there's something that like I can see you two working on a book together and it would be almost seamless. But the only, and this is so weird, the only real thing that popped into my mind was Winsor McKay. Like,
Oh wow.
would you like take us through your influences and like how you came to your style now? What did you
Yeah.
absorb to get to where you are today?
Hold on one second. My kids are peeking in. What's up?
I see a
He's asking
switch.
for more switch. He's asking for switch time, guys. On the interview, he's asking me for switch time. Usually the answer would be no, but I'm in the middle of the interview. All right. Have fun, buddy.
Mine is
All right.
right here.
He's
I was
looking
talking
at
to my
his
son
future
right
right
before
there.
I got on here. But yeah,
But yeah, influences.
yeah.
I got
Yeah.
nothing. I got nothing. I'm sorry.
It's the
Go
future.
ahead.
The future. Yeah, influences. I used to. Let me see. I mean, I grew up. I was very. Yeah, I had like the traditional comic influences growing up, like John Mishima, Steve Ditko, all that stuff originally. Because I grew up as a Marvel DC guy. I wasn't exposed to like indie comics. And then I think as most comic creators do, I tried to ape like all their styles, except I was horrible at it. I was horrible. I was not that guy. So then I got into college and I started kind of. I had a friend at the time who noticed something. So I was trying to do this kind of Marvel-esque Big Two style thing, and I was horrible at it. And then one day I just was messing around with like a cartoony thing on the side. I wasn't even really trying; it just came out of me. And the friend of mine said, this is like this Marvel thing you did is trash, but this thing over here you did, I think this might actually be your thing. I thought, oh, that's interesting because it didn't take a lot of like, it just naturally came out. So at that point, I just decided, okay, I think maybe there's something to this. So I started, and this is also college. So I got really into, the Kevin Smith movies and that sort of thing. And then I ended up finding out, Kevin Smith's Clerks had a cartoon. So it's a very like, kind of almost like very simple, old school kind of animation,
Yeah.
very simple shapes and stuff. And that ended up leading me to the Clerks comic, which is drawn by Jim Mafood. And that's when I found Jim's work. And I said, holy crap, I didn't know you could make comics like this. Like, what is this? This is a completely different world. And then from there, it just opened up everything. So I found Dave Crosland through who did Puffed with Layman. And then from there, I started finding like Rob Schraub, Scud.
Good.
Yeah, Scud. And then from there, I was also in an anime phase at the time. So, it was like Dragon Ball Z, so Akira Toriyama, Rumika Takahashi. So like there's that manga influence that kind of peeks in. So like, I think it's all of that put together. Plus I was a Warner Brothers, like Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry kid growing up. So like, I think in terms of cartoons. So I think all of that kind of came together. But the first thing I did was I kind of, again, strategically, which is weird. I was just really strategic about this. I basically unlearned everything I knew about comics and how to draw them. because I kept trying to do this Marvel DC thing. I sucked. So I said, screw it. Instead of focusing on all the detail with abs and muscles and all this stuff, what if I just strip this down as basic as you could possibly get it? Focus on storytelling and layout and that sort of thing, and just build on top of that. So that's what I did. I did a comic that was pretty biographical, which I don't recommend in college. I don't recommend that in college, but I did. And it was very, very simple shapes, very Clerks cartoon-esque. And I learned a ton about storytelling. And because I wasn't spending all my time trying to, do these highly rendered things, it was just cartoony, simple storytelling. And then from there, over the years, you just start adding stuff on top of it. I start adding a detail. Oh, I'm going to draw an ear like this. Oh, this is going to look like this. And just over the next 7 years, it started to take on its own thing. And, it kind of went from me trying to do a bad version of Jimba Food to becoming something completely, unique. Mm-hmm. So it just took a lot of time. But yeah, that's kind of how it shaped.
Yeah, I can see.
I'm kind of.
Oh, go ahead, dude. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say I'm kind of jealous because I've been trying to break my right drawing hand because I'm still like super influenced by like Jack Kirby, Walt Simonson, Howard Chaykin, Frank Miller, and all those guys. And sometimes when I'm just drawing nothing on the side that no one's ever going to see, I'm like, I wish I was drawing like that, or on a paper napkin, and doing comics in that way. And I need to figure out a project that will allow me to do that or give me permission. But it's interesting because you're talking about like finding that kind of jazz, that freestyle, right? Or whatever. But I also see you, I view you, and I hear you as being a super intentional human being. Like there seems to be a lot of method and compartmentalizing. Like you figure things out, and like I mean, not that you draw the same ear over and over again, but like you found your ear, and your nose and your. So can you talk a little bit about that, or is there do you free up when you're drawing, or do you freeze up? Like what goes on?
Man, I don't know. I think there's just a transition that kind of happens where, I think every creator has to kind of walk that line where when you go to a blank page and you have to figure out how is this going to shake out, because this can go any million different directions. So there has to be you have to confine it, you have to bring order to it. And just so I think that's the first part for me is like I have to confine it. I have to like draw the boundaries, literally draw the borders and the gutters and everything. And then so that's very intentional, even with like layouts and that sort of thing. But I think when I actually get into it, when I'm done with the rough penciling aspect of it, when I get into it, it is very jazz. Like there is a transition that happens. Like I hate drawing thumbnails. I hate doing the initial rough pencils. I hate all that stuff. I don't like it because it is having to control and bring things in. But when I get
comics,
into it,
and I was gonna say that's comic. Actually, whenever I describe what is comics, once you know the story, you're trying to figure out the story, you're hatching it. It is the layout. Once you figure out your layout and the balloon placement, then you're almost free to let yourself to go a little wild. And that's where I sometimes have a hiccup because I'm still trying to figure something out, like with shapes and whatever. But yeah, no, I agree. I dread the layout, but once I have the layout, that's the gold right there.
Yeah. So usually what I would do is I do a bunch of layouts at a time. So like I'll do I'm about to start drawing the last issue of Farmhand. So that's going to be 28 pages. So it's been thumbnailed out for a good bit. So now I just need to go in and actually I even have all the pages kind of laid out, like broken up. I just need to go in and do all the layouts, and that's going to be the worst part. It's absolutely going to be the worst part. I'm probably just going to dedicate a full week to just chopping through all of them. But once that's done, going back and tightening them up. Usually I got, if you've watched my YouTube videos, when I'm sketching, I'm usually sketching with a really dull blue pencil for the layouts because I don't want to go into tight detail. So I'm just kind of moving stuff around, broad shapes. I think it was one of the Kuberts was talking about blobbing things in. Like it's all just like big shapes. He's not looking at intricate detail. It's just boom, he's putting stuff in. So like once I've done that, I can go back with I have a really nice fine technical pencil with blue lead in it, blue graphite, and I'll go back and then I'll start like doing the fun stuff, which is the detail stuff. It's like the actual line work I'll be inking on top of.
Mm.
So that's at some point of like flow happens during that stage. That's when time kind of gets weird and you start like losing time. It's like, whoa, how did 2 hours just go by? And then after that, whenever I get to the inks, that is kind of automatic. Like that is put a podcast on, put music on or something like that. I don't have to think about this. This is just going to happen, and it's beautiful. It's my favorite part of the process.
We have the same process in a lot of ways because I do the light blue thumbnails, but what I don't do, and I've done it recently a couple times, is I don't blow them up and light box them because I draw, pen and paper, and then I do a darker. No, I take the same light blue. It's because I don't want to erase. We're not erasing here. And then I do a hard penciling. The hard penciling line with the light blue, and then I go to ink and, like you said, put on the podcast, make all the noise, do whatever you want.
Yep.
So
Yep.
Yeah, that's how I approach lettering a lot. Is that I'll just like I get into like a fugue state, like just kind of like I'll listen to, weirdly enough, Sade or some kind of like relatively kind of smooth R&B, and like it'll just because it's all rhythm, so I don't have to really think about lyrics, so it doesn't distract me from like taking words and putting them there, and it's just shapes and tails. And where the worst part, I appreciate the two of you more than anything, especially since I've worked with Dean, but like I appreciate the both of you saying when I lay out I do the balloons, because I have worked with so many artists that each panel has to be like a pinup or something, and it's like I still got to put the words in there, man. Like you got to give me something to work with. Like, and I'll Photoshop it, and shrink it down, and it's like it works, but it's not the best, So it's. I think the mechanics sometimes. I think a lot of newer artists kind of want to skip the mechanic part of it and just get to the fun part, But I think hearing you guys say it, like to any artist out there watching or listening, the mechanics part are very important, man. Like you gotta keep those skills sharp.
It's funny that you bring that up, Vito, because I think I did. Did I ever draw a page for Marvel and DC that I penciled and got lettered? I don't think so. But when I was Chaikin and Simonson's assistant in Sienkiewicz in 1985, I do remember seeing boards that were penciled or laid out and then professionally lettered, and then they would go finish the line art or the inks, So I do remember that. And then when I did some of my own comics, I lettered my pages, right? Hand lettered onto the boards, right?
Wow.
Now, for many, many years, I digitally letter in Photoshop, right? So what it means is that you're kind of guessing the space where the words are going to go, and hopefully they're the same words, right? Or a sound effect or something. And so to me, half the time when I'm drawing a page, I look at the page and there's that, and negative space is your friend for words and text and stuff. But I do feel like there's something missing on the page because comics are words and pictures often, And I remember when I was working on the Fox in, I think it was 2015 or 2016, and we had a backup feature that Mike Cavallaro was penciling, and it was written by J.M. DeMatteis, and it was featuring the Shield, and then the story was going to converge with the Fox story in the 5th issue. Anyway, Mike was able to get Terry Austin to ink him.
Late.
And Terry, and it was amazing, from our X-Men, John Byrne, Chris Claremont era, and anything else. And he had a gripe, which he was getting. He was like, "Why am I inking areas on the page that are going to be covered up with words? Why can't you letter these pages?" And he's an old timer, and I respect his gripe, but he basically said that he was going to quit, either letter the pages in the future, or I'm going to quit. And basically, Terry Austin has quit comics because of he didn't want to add more ink to areas or ink a plant that's just going to be covered by words, And I get that because it is frustrating to draw stuff that it doesn't feel like a complete page, But that's
Mhm.
also the tools we have today and how a lot of us work, so.
And
Yeah,
how a
yeah.
lot of
I
us
do like
learn.
occasionally. Yeah, I do like. There have been times where, Layman, he lettered Chew. There are quite a few times where he would cover something that was like the weaker part of the drawing. It's like, good,
Mhm.
good job.
There you go.
Like cover up, cover up that horse. Like just cover it up.
And Layman was like, wait, that's a horse? No.
I've covered up I've covered up many a double pinky on one hand with the word
Come
line.
on.
So,
Oh,
well,
Well, then wait, you were working with AI. That's some AI art.
before, and it was a human. Um, before we forget, again, like you on your podcast, you've talked about some controversial topics, and I think the one that's been popping up a lot, and one that I've seen you kind of comment on a little bit, is the pay grade uh, of incoming artists for Marvel and DC. Um,
mm.
I think I can't remember who was
I
it.
actually wrote that down, Vito. If you want me to read it out,
Yeah, I
you're
can't
talking
remember
about
who brought it
the
up
page rate
online though.
thing? All right, so I have two topics, and I wrote down one that I want to read out so we can talk about a little bit,
Mm.
and then I have another one that's even more interesting to me. But let me read this topic. So Bleeding Cool wrote an article called "So What Does a Big Two Comics Artist Get Paid When They Start Out?" Okay. It stated that Marvel and DC pencilers start at about $160 per page, totaling about 38,400 annually without benefits. There's no holiday pay or sickness pay in this gig, let alone healthcare. So that's $3,200 a month, which comes to that $38,400 a year. If you sell original art, it could add possibly $15,000 to $20,000, enhancing overall income significantly. Then there's convention work, commissions, covers, and other pathways.
Mhm.
So the article makes the point that in New York, the minimum wage is $17 an hour, 40 hours per week. That's $35,360 a year. But you might get holiday pay, sick pay, and health insurance as part of that. Creator-owned comics provide future prospects. Digital adaptation varies income. We all know comic book creators work way more than 40 hours a week. And recently, I'm making a lot less than $3,200 a month. In fact, I'm not making enough money to pay my current bills. Where do you guys stand, and how are you creating while making a living?
I do want to point out
Mm.
one more thing, and that is
Go.
royalty structure. I believe that when I worked for Marvel and DC, this is going over 20 years ago at this point. DC gave you a lower page rate for writers anyway, and it was a better royalty structure,
Mm.
whereas Marvel gave you a higher page rate and no royalty
Mm.
payments. Again, this is for writers, and this might not be the same thing for artists. And this is 20 years ago, so I'm outside of
Mm.
my contracted NDA. They're talking about contracts, I would say, but I don't know how different
Well,
that is today.
well, yeah. So the question is, how do we keep going? Essentially.
Well, like not how do we keep going? And forgive
Mm.
me for bringing up because the article mentions the minimum wage in New York is
Hmm.
$17 an hour. I don't know where it is in Pittsburgh or where
Hmm.
everybody, like
I
it
think it's
varies, it changes.
Hmm.
1575, maybe 1550 in Pittsburgh.
And I think
Mm.
part of what it's saying, the article or the people talking about this, is that you might as well just get a minimum wage job.
Yeah.
But we can't do that. I don't think
Mm.
anyone. Well, actually, you do, Vito. You
Yeah.
have. Is it a minimum wage job? You
No,
have a day job.
I've been there long enough that I'm getting better than minimum wage. And
Okay.
Mm.
when I started out at my current job, the minimum wage was much lower than it is now, but I started out at a higher tier anyway, based on experience.
Okay.
So now my
Mm.
pay is above minimum wage, but it's not that far away.
Right. Right.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
think part of what the article is trying to say is, um, or at least the way I interpret it, I don't know how long it takes Rob to draw a comic.
Mm.
It's taken me longer as I've gotten older, right?
Mm.
Um, but let's say you have a 40-hour a week job, you can
Mm.
still make a living, just squeak by and have a quality of life. And I don't think I
Mm.
have a quality of life. I also live in the most expensive city in the world. So like, but I'm a native, so it's really hard for me to pull that trigger and leave.
Yeah.
So I am
Mhm.
living right now off the fumes of Kickstarters and the little gigs I get here and there and whatever, right? I've also
Mhm.
not been pursuing hard because I've kind of become allergic to pitching. I don't know why. It's a weird thing that's happened to me. I think maybe because the deals aren't great, and
Mhm.
it seems like most publishers go and kickstart the comic anyway and depend on your people to go. And I'm like, I should just do it myself, you know?
Yeah.
So, but that's another conversation. So
Mhm.
I think that like you find out what it pays, and then what I'm hoping is that like fans or people who think, oh, you're a cartoonist, you must do really
Mhm.
no. You are sacrificing a lot to make comics.
Yeah.
Again, nobody
Yeah.
put a gun to my head,
Mhm.
but I wonder how you feel about that, Rob.
I mean, for me, I mean, I'm kind of in a. I mean, she was a blessing for me in numerous ways. I mean, having that kind of success early in my career kind of built a good foundation for me to be able to take risks that I wouldn't have been able to do a farmhand without a chew. But that said, I think really really in the last, like, especially since COVID, most of the work I've been kind of paying my bills with is not what I would call mainstream comics. It's not direct market comics. Like, I did a comic for Microsoft for a game company, Compulsion Games, for their new game South of Midnight. I've done work for a new publisher called Rekka. Rekka is Rich actually Bleeding Cool actually did a whole feature on them. So they're not your traditional kind of comic book company. They stem from a cybersecurity company who basically has this amazing community who started their own comic company, and they're awesome to deal with. So
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of what I've been working on is kind of outside of it's making comics outside of mainstream comics. And the sad thing is, I think a lot of creators do experience this at some point. The sad fact is, a lot of times the money is better outside of comics. The money making comics is better outside of mainstream comics than it is inside of mainstream comics, which is kind of ass backwards. But it's true. Like the experience, and I've worked for these companies. I've done a little Marvel, done a little DC. I've been at Image most of my career. But the level of joy that I've been able to see in the clients I have outside of mainstream comics, is unbelievable. Like, they love comics and they're
Mm-hmm.
happy about everything I turn in. They let me be me. They let me do my thing. I turn it in on time. They're super grateful and super happy. And I basically have been able to negotiate better deals where uh, I'm basically negotiating rates that are higher than anything I would get at Marvel or DC outside of comics. Uh, and in a lot of cases, I'll own a piece of it as well. I'll be able to negotiate. Okay, well, let me have this, and they'll say, okay, sure. So it's just an all around better situation for me than it would be if I was working at Marvel or DC.
So besides your talent and your ability to draw and make comics, and this is going to sound weird, don't be offended. It, like you have not worked for Marvel and DC or drawn anything from Marvel and DC, right?
A little bit, not much.
So you don't have that to recommend you. So I was going to ask, what recommends you to outside people who have the money to pay to make comics? Was it Chew? Was it your portfolio? It's
Mhm.
not that you're not. It's not because you drew Spider-Man and Batman. Where I do think a lot of companies would be like, "Oh, he drew Spider-Man and Batman. You got to hire that guy." But no, you're
Yeah.
coming in with Chew and now Farmhand and
Mhm.
whatever presence you have online, right? So
Mhm.
I think that and me, my career has been so schizophrenic. I hopscotch between indie, mainstream, memoir, superhero, print, web. Like you can't tag me, and yet you can't find me either. Like so
Mhm.
it's always trying to figure out like how to, you stuck with something for 8 years.
Yeah.
And now Farmhand has been what another what 6? No,
Well, COVID happened right in the middle of it, so that
yeah,
hit a delay. But it's been, yeah, I mean, 8 years on
eight
that as
years.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you're
yeah.
basically known for doing two comics and then whatever else you
Hmm.
scratch up, like
Hmm.
so it is interesting how like I too have had a similar experience where people like it's almost like people who work in comics or in the industry are just grumpy, and don't want half of them don't want to be in it, and what I was discussing with Vito early on in this uh episodes of the podcast, was that at this point I'm going to be 58 at the end of May, and
Mhm.
I need to find, you said the word joy. I need
Mhm.
to find the joy of making comics because it ain't money
Mhm.
right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So what can I do to get by? And when I sit down and draw, even though I'm going to pull my hair out on those layouts,
Mhm.
why am I making this comic? Why am I drawing this page, this panel?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's got to be the joy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, it kind of all boils down to what else would I do? Like this is kind of my thing. I mean, I think every comic creator I know has thought about and maybe even fantasized about quitting and getting an
Hmm.
actual like real job. For
Hmm.
me, it's I've joked about this online before, but there's a shoe store that used to be on the way to dropping my kids off at school, and I drive by that thing every day, and I have a sign in the window that says "Now hiring," and I would
Hmm.
always think I could probably kick ass as a shoe store manager, like just 9 to 5. I get my paycheck on Friday. I go home. I'm not always haunted by the stories I want to tell. I can just like live a nice, peaceful
I
life.
mean,
Yeah, I
To
mean,
that,
it's a
I
yeah.
have to say, I remember a gentleman who sold shoes and would always tell one story over and over again about how he caught X amount of touchdowns in one game. I don't remember Al Bundy being a very happy man.
Touche, touche.
but there is I mean, not to make fun of shoe salesmen.
No,
They're
not at all.
they're awesome human beings, but
Yeah,
there is a sense of bliss.
yeah.
And I've written about this in one of my plays. I talk about how, and again, I don't mean to veer from a shoe salesman to this
Mhm.
thought, but like when you can remove a certain sense of choice and just lean into, oh, a comfort, a place of comfort where you can
That's
sleep at night,
that's what
you
Yeah.
know?
me working retail is. Like I can really just do my job on muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
and I know it
Mm-hmm.
on Monday I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing this thing, on Tuesday I'm doing this thing, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle's like it's draining you, my wife. It's draining you,
Mhm.
and it's like you should either find something else, and then she always like she's always encouraging me to find something else. But then she goes, I know how much you enjoy it, and how much you
Yeah.
enjoy the people you work with, and how much the job centers you. And so like
Hmm.
it's not an easy it's not easy to just go, I'm going to quit. Dean remembers a couple of years ago when I was in his studio. The reason why I got into his studio is because my wife literally called him on the phone and said, "Get this man out of my house because he's not getting anything done." And like we can afford the studio rent. Just let him. Is there a spot in your studio that he could sit at? And probably one of the most productive times of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember being very early in my career. We were at a show this is before Chew. I was at a show in Austin, and it happened to be the same show that Robert Kirkman was at. This is before Robert Kirkman became Robert Kirkman. He was working on The Walking Dead, so he was already like the most successful person at the show, but he wasn't like anywhere near what he is now. And we ended up hanging out, and this is the first time I'd met him. We ended up having dinner. All the talent, got brought out for dinner, and he ended up sitting across from me and my wife. And we just ended up talking business, and he's ahead of me in his career. I'm still coming up, kind of offering some wisdom. And he was talking about how he had gone into all this credit card debt. He was funding all these projects that none of them blew up. And basically, what he told his wife was, look, I'm gonna be doing this one way or another. Like I'm always, even if I'm the guy in my basement, like like working on this thing, this is absolutely going to happen. And thankfully for him, it kicked off and they're doing great. But I just think that I don't know, like everyone I know who does this, it reminds me of I don't know if you guys watch much like reality TV or anything. There's a show called Bering Sea Gold. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Uh, we just binged it like last year. It ended up being very, very good. We're big like Discovery Channel people. And it's basically about it takes place in Nome, Alaska, where there's a lot of gold mining. There's a lot of deep sea diving for gold, and it's fascinating because it's all these different kind of like mercenaries. They're all like have their own boats, and they're all going out and they're digging, they're diving, and some are awesome boats who are just kicking ass. They're the Robert Kirkmans of Bering Sea Gold, and then you have like these other guys who are like totally shady and crooks, and they're just sucking at it, but they always come back. And I'm watching this and I keep thinking my wife is an entrepreneur also. So we're looking at this and I'm like, this is such a great picture of comics. Like, this is comics. You have a bunch of people who are just mercenaries who are all kind of like digging for gold. And every now and again, one of us gets lucky. but for the most part, we all just get just a little hint of it to keep us going. And sometimes sometimes that can be a hard life. It can really be difficult, but the love of it, it's just so contagious. There's something about it.
So what you're saying
it's funny.
See, I'm getting a lesson from Rob right now. What he's saying to me is Robert Kirkman was a guy in his basement doing it. I'm a guy in his bathroom doing it. So I could be the next Robert Kirkman. Got it.
Yes.
I mean, gee. I think in the mid 90s, like 95. Okay. And the first like 6 years I went, whatever, I remember seeing there was this dude who his comic was called Bob the Angry Flower, I think. Bob the Angry Flower. And it was just this dude that had a big like flower, like daisy around his head. And he just stood there. A lot of people would sit down. He stood up the whole time from his comics with just an angry grimace on his face, right? Like, and I always stayed away from him. I was like, what's up with this guy, right? And so I stopped going to SPX for a while. And then the next time I went, I didn't see him there or whatever. And then a few years ago, I was at San Diego Comic-Con, and we're talking about many, many years later now, right? Like 25 or whatever. And I'm going to Artist Alley, and there's fucking Bob the Angry Flower. And I'm like, this dude is still at it, man. And I went and I hugged him. It was the first time I ever approached him and talked to him. And I just hugged him. And the reason why I bring it up is like, I think ultimately you find your way, because as Howard Chaykin says, comics is a calling. But I added something to that. Comics is a calling and a curse, because you find out you can't do anything else. So you have to do it no matter what. And it brings so much pain and joy, and there's something beautiful about seeing that Bob there, who is still at it and still making comics. I don't know how many he sold it in 4 days at San Diego, like 6 copies. It doesn't matter. He's going to make the next issue of that comic book, and I love that. And when I was younger, I'd be like, what an idiot, cut it out. Like, go get a job, like now I'm like, no, man, I'm rooting for Bob the Angry Flower.
Yeah. My wife and I have had these conversations before. I mean, she's a very responsible person. She balances me quite well. But we've had conversations, especially after COVID. I think COVID for us, for me at least, well, for a lot of people, but it just kind of flipped everything on its head. And I was really considering walking away from comics and just getting a normal job, just because it can just get really, really frustrating. And I mean, the recent events with everything going on with Diamond and everything else, like it can drain the life out of. So there were moments where my wife and I had some really honest conversations and said, it's been a good run. Maybe it's time to hang this up. And she just looks at me and she's like, what else are you doing? What else are you going to do? This is the only thing I've ever wanted to do. I'm built for it. I'm good at it. And it is a call, but sometimes calls suck. Sometimes they're very difficult. Like I think of basically every person in the Bible who gets called is like not the happiest camper. It's just like, it was not great. It's like, oh crap, I'm called. I'm called to the desert and like struggle. And comics are absolutely that,
Oh man, Rob just got biblical.
That's so good. It's such a good allegory, though.
I love it. So, all right. So I don't know if you guys have a couple of questions. I have one more that I can spring on us. And then it's another one I'm going to read because I wrote it down. And I actually have a thought. Okay. All right. So the Hollywood Reporter had an article, quote, Gen Z is choosing creator content over premium TV, movies, end quote. Deloitte's 19th annual digital media trends survey finds that 56% of Gen Zs and 43% of millennials surveyed find social media content, quote, more relevant than traditional TV shows and movies, and roughly half feel a stronger personal connection to social media creators than to TV personalities or actors. Quote, think about the war for people's attention and time that exists today between traditional media and social media, end quote, says China Widener, vice chair of Deloitte LLP and US technology media and telecom leader. She said with Gen Z, again, they spend 54% more time and think of it as about 50 minutes a day on average, more on their social platforms, and they spend about 43 minutes a day less in traditional TV and media. So when you just think about it in the context of where they're spending their time, are they using both service types? Yes, but they are spending more time in the social media platforms than they are in the traditional platforms. So I've always said, ever since I started posting things online, I realized I wasn't competing for people's money because people have money. I was competing for their time.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that is it. You know, I think it's very, very interesting that, and it confirms a lot of things I've been feeling that they are, if I heard that correctly, it sounds like they're veering away from the more corporate, kind of impersonal, kind of social engineered focus group stuff and veering toward like people, like kind of raw, more, I guess, hopefully sometimes more authentic, I would say, probably people.
I would even add to that, and this is where I get a little scared, is so one could hazard that when you're doing your indie comics, it's a little more true, let's just say, even if that's not totally true, because I feel like, for instance, Mark Waid, who's a great mainstream writer, puts everything into his mainstream comics. I think you're getting the most authentic Mark Waid as best as possible through Superman and everybody else, right? But if you're an indie guy or indie person, one could hazard, oh, well, you're being more true because it's not corporate, or you're not selling out, or whatever the hell. And the thing that worries me though is that when you're scrolling through a phone, how much narrative are you actually indulging? And is what's happening in the future is for the young consumers or readers, let's call it, are they not reading as much and they're just getting like dopamine hits? And is content becoming 15 seconds long, you know, for the joke or the punchline or the cliffhanger or the spoiler or the end, and just to finish that thought, Vito, real quick, is so I'm crafting stories, and are you even going to read my 24-page comic or my graphic novel, or are you even going to be able to watch a movie, you know, because it's 2 hours long? So I'm worried. And why am I worried about the kids? Maybe I shouldn't be worried about the kid. Maybe they're just telling me what they want, you know, because it is offered. There are books and movies and everything out there. They still exist. They didn't disappear. But this phone, this screen world that we all are living in and are all guilty of, you know, it's tough. It's a tough thing to navigate. Vito, you're going to say.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, I don't know how much authenticity comes into play. Gen Z is a generation that grew up with the internet already in their hands, literally in their hands. So they're just responding to what they've always been able to access, I think. So, but the thing is, I don't know that it's a like railing against mainstream as much as it is, well, this is an anime that I saw clips of that I kind of now, because I would imagine my daughter is in the Gen Z group. You know, she's 12. She's responding to certain anime, certain clips that she sees on TikTok and stuff. And then she goes and she does her research. She's like, all right, well, I got her a Crunchyroll subscription for her birthday. So she watches anime on there. She watches, Netflix anime. She watches stuff on whatever's on Disney Plus anime, and then she's got a couple of books behind me, that she's reading, um, of the mangas that are based on the anime. So it's not a lack of interest in the media or anything like that. It's not that she won't watch a movie. I just think that it just goes to show that, every generation's into their own thing. I don't think it has anything to do with necessarily the creators, because a lot of creators are today are not creators, they're influencers. And I don't know what an influencer is. Rob even mentioned it earlier when he was talking about his YouTube channel. I don't know what an influencer is, like I don't know what my goal is in being on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever we put the podcast. Michelle, my wife, she goes, "You need to start putting the podcast on TikTok." What? Like, that's a lot of work. This is not my 24-hour day, 7-day a week job. Like, this is just like Thursdays and then Sundays when I'm getting the video ready. And then Thursdays mornings when I'm getting the podcast on Spotify. It's like, I can only do this 3 days a week. Like I can't doing, YouTube shorts, because everything, like you were saying, Dean, it's all like these little quick hits, like the dopamine hit. So you're looking at YouTube shorts, you're looking at Instagram reels, you're looking at Facebook stories, you're looking at TikToks. It's like, that's a lot, like to try to capture the attention of one audience. I would love to have a staff or the time to do it all, but there's no way that I could do it all. And hopefully the technology slows the frick down enough so that I can figure out a way to get my in.
What is Blue Sky? What's Threads? I mean, I'm on Blue Sky, but now somehow I'm on Threads, and Instagram goes to Facebook. And then I had a thing happen to me recently where I was drawing a not a porno comic, but basically a comic that had, genitalia, let's call it. Okay. And I drew one of the panels, and I thought it was very safe, was a man spooning a woman. Okay. But you didn't see anything, but they were naked on a beach. But again, the way I draw, it's like Archie Comics porn. Like, it's not, it's very safe. And I posted it on Instagram, but because I guess there's an automatic setting, it bumps it over to Facebook, right? On Instagram, it got a lot of likes and it told me how great it was doing. On Facebook, they tried to shut me down for showing porn. And I'm like, you guys are together. Make up your minds. What are you trying to do to me, man? But just to go back to the article, which, is just data and it's non-judgmental. It's just saying, seems like younger people are more interested in, and I'll put it like this. I think younger people are less interested in plot and more interested in character. I think that's something that I learned about animation recently, is that, you can have a story, but just have a premise and really fun characters that we want to keep revisiting. You don't need to necessarily come up with all these plot twists as much anymore, even though half the things that people sell you are something with a plot twist, or you will never see this coming, but you do. We craft stories.
I think it's all about character. I mean, the idea, going back to Kirkman, whenever we had just started Chew, and I was really concerned. I mean, it's actually before the first issue came out. I was really wanting it to do well, and wanting it to just, I wanted to do all the right things and give it the best possible chance. So I emailed him and we went back and forth, and I asked him just, what's your advice on just keeping this going? Because Walking Dead was blowing up, Invincible was blowing up at that point. And his what he came back with was, it's all about character. Like, you have to have characters people care about. Why else would they come back? And I think that's true. I think, just going from my kids are, my youngest son, who came in with the Switch earlier, is 8. My daughter is 10, and my oldest boy is 14. And they are all about character. My 14-year-old, obviously the oldest, he's more sophisticated, but he's very much into the anime. He wants a cool premise. He wants something that looks cool. He wants, and again, he basically will he'll discover it in anime form, and then he'll be like, cool, I want to go get the manga now. And it kind of spiders out from there. I think, kind of going back to the attention thing, I do have concerns about the attention span people have, which is a big part of why back in 2020, I had this idea that kind of going back to the Facebook thing, I don't like how they kind of control things. I don't like how, I was having all this engagement on back when I'm not on Twitter. I haven't been on Twitter in like 5 years or something. But back in the early days of Twitter, I had fantastic engagements. It was just really, really good. And at some point, it just went flat. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if I pissed somebody off or something. I have no idea. But I just started noticing, even before they kind of revealed kind of the inner workings of social media, I knew, I was like, clearly something has changed. Clearly they can kind of like touch it and put their finger on the scale and say, you go no further. And I don't like that. So my big thing is, while I engage in social media, I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram occasionally. I'll post on Facebook, usually jokes or whatever. But usually most of my engagement is either via my Patreon or my newsletter. So I like taking people offline and just talking directly to them. I don't like having all of this kind of outside manipulation.
I do
So
think
yeah,
the future is newsletters, and
yeah.
I agree. It's like there's something direct about it. There's people can comment or not, and you feel like you've had a volley. It's not as necessarily as participatory as maybe I'm used to, at least on my Facebook and Instagram, but you get some, and I do think that like there is more sense of control, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it does boil down to, I mean, what you said about connection. I think people really want to connect. And I think I like even going back to AI, like I'm not as concerned. Like, yes, it's already hurting. It's already hurting people. Um, but I think ultimately people will search out for connection. And when I look at what we consume, whether it's movies, stories, you go to Instagram, you go to Reels. What is every reel? Every reel is basically a person doing a thing. It is craft. It is we like watching people, and I think AI can't replace that. Yes, it can make a pretty image from time to time, that sort of thing, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it's about people, and I think people want to connect, and I think if anything, the hyper technological world we're kind of going into, I think yes, some people get lost in it. I mean, it's already happening, especially young people. I mean, with my kids, my kids don't have phones. My kids are not on social media. I basically indoctrinated my kids to tell them social media sucks. Like it's awful. Like, let me explain to you what social media is. And they just wrinkle their noses and like, this is awful. Adults do this. I'm like, yes, we do this. Um, and they aren't exposed to this stuff, and we tell them outright why. It's because we're trying to preserve their attention. We're trying to preserve their ability to focus on things. We want them to read long books. We want them to be able to be still and kind of engage with the medium. So a lot of my books, even with my book Moseley at Boom, was largely about technology. It's about a future where AI is basically taken over. I make the joke in it that the Instagram reels are basically like 5 microseconds long at that point. Like it's just like everything's fast, boom, boom, boom. So I think like anything else, like any good post-apocalyptic movie, one half of the population goes that way, but the other population is just like, this is crazy. We're gonna go back to the farm. We're gonna like get chickens and like just go like not do this whole thing. So I'm actually pretty hopeful about this stuff. Yeah, I'm not as concerned about it as I think a lot of people are.
How you guys both have kids, and in fact, I actually have a daughter, a biological daughter,
Mhm.
but I don't keep track with her behavior. Like, are you concerned with and not we're not going to solve this right now, but I feel like I've noticed that maybe kids don't necessarily engage with each other as much because they're on they well, not your kids, Rob, but because of technology, and
Mhm.
they lean on that and they find their friendships or their social life through that. Or maybe I'm
Mhm.
getting it totally wrong, and maybe they're all hanging out with each other and forget phones. I
Mhm.
just see a lot of people on their phone, and especially a lot of adults.
Yeah, yeah. I see some of that too. I mean, my son, my 14-year-old, we got him his first iPhone this year, but it's locked down. Like I supervise everything. So he has no internet access or no social media. He can't install apps or any of that stuff. It's basically like we're trying to get them to a place where they're eventually they're going to leave my house and they're going to have their own lives. So like I want them to be able to be equipped to like be balanced human beings when they leave my house. So I'm trying to like introduce them slowly to it. But yeah, I mean, whenever they come over, he has friends who come over, or have a birthday party or something, and you just look at the couch and it's just a bunch of kids like on the
Yeah.
devices. It's like, are you guys like what is this? And they're not as bad. I mean, they do engage. They go out, throw the football around, that sort of thing. But I think in their downtime moments, they probably have less um, like naturally bored moments. So I think we try to like make them have bored moments. We're like, okay, put the stuff down, go outside and go do a thing. Um, but yeah, no, there's with adults too. I catch myself with it too, where if I have a still moment, if I'm somewhere waiting for something, the odds are I have to tell myself, do not reach for your phone and like
Hmm.
scroll on whatever. Just like have a moment. With me, it's like checkout aisles. I don't want to like be. I just want to like be in the moment, to be present, and not get lost in the device. But the temptation's there for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I could
See,
imagine growing up with this at all.
no, yeah, it's crazy. Like, but we're witness to it. But yeah,
Mm.
to listen, I don't know what it's like to ever come to New York City for the first time because I'm a native New Yorker. And funnily enough, you were talking before about showing your portfolio to artists and Eric Larson. I don't think I've ever shown my portfolio at a Comic Con.
Do
I
you
probably
even
did
have
when I got the job with, huh?
do you even have a portfolio? Like, do you have like a book with your art?
I know I've had pages of artwork in an actual portfolio when I was younger.
Mm.
I don't think I ever went to like an artist and said, "What do you think of my work?" Like,
Well,
which is crazy because that's natural, that's normal. Like, like, and I know when I went to work for, in 1985, my senior year of high school, to work with Chaikin and Sienkiewicz and Simonson, I must have shown them something, right? To at least
mm-hmm.
get in the door to fill in blacks and erase pages and draw backgrounds once in a while. But
Mm-hmm.
God, I don't know. I'm kind of jealous of that. And it reminds me of a story that I've said before, but the best portfolio review I ever saw was at Baltimore Comic Con, George Perez.
Mm.
And George Perez is just this magnetic human being, and he was a great artist, but you could tell he was such a
Yeah.
fan of comics that you saw in his artwork, right? Like
Mm.
really incredible fan art, almost it was his style. And I remember him saying to someone, and I picked up on it because he was repeating. He was telling this kid, he was turning the page. He's like, "You see the way you draw like this thing right here." And the kid's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You see the way you draw perspective?" He's like, "Yeah." He said, "You see the way you draw backgrounds?" He said, he kept saying, "You see the way you draw, the see the way," and then finally ended with, "Yeah, don't draw like that anymore. Not like that. Don't do that. Don't do it like that anymore." And it was like, what just happened? Like, and the kid was like, oh, okay, yeah, you're probably right. I shouldn't do it like that anymore. And then he
Yeah.
gave him more constructive criticism. But to get to that smackdown was such a beautiful like dance, or
Yeah.
song. It was incredible to watch. But I don't think I've ever experienced that. And I know I would have been shut down,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
the hell I was drawing back then. So. All
Yeah.
right. Well, did you guys have any questions yourselves? Any hot topics?
Hmm.
I,
What
I
do you
gotta
think? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I gotta ask Rob, like
Mhm.
Lafayette, Louisiana, what's the best dish?
Oh, geez. Okay. We have a place. It's funny. We just had a Comic Con. We have a local Comic Con here. That we just had a few weeks ago, and we had a bunch of creators come down. It was great. So I was basically driving them around and feeding them at every moment. Um, there is a place called Fezos, Fezzos, that is just straight up like delicious Cajun food. So we have what's called crawfish etouffee. I don't know if you ever had an etouffee before.
No.
It's hard to describe. I'm a cook, but I've never made it before. I think it's a cream based kind of thing, but it's basically rice with you can put shrimp or whatever seafood on it with this really delicious sauce. Sometimes they put a fillet of fried catfish like right on top of it. It's the kind of thing that you don't want to eat very often, like like only on special occasions. Because we ate this very late after the show, and everyone just went to bed right after.
I was gonna say, of course, that like
Yeah.
it's a heart attack, like,
Yeah.
but I don't eat fish, so give me another dish like a chicken
Oh
or meat.
man. Let me see. Well, we have good po' boys. Do you know what a po' boy is?
Isn't that shrimp though?
Well, there's
Yes,
different
sir.
kinds. I mean, there's like sausage, there's
Oh, okay. I've
catfish.
heard of
There's
po'
different.
boys,
Yeah,
but what is it? It's just a sandwich, right? Called
it's
a
just a
po' boy.
sandwich.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah,
a sandwich. Yeah, it's basically like a it's kind of like I guess maybe like a Subway sandwich, but on French bread, sort of.
Mm,
It's good. It's very simple, but very delicious. So we have entirely too much good food here, really.
yeah.
So
No, that's
it's
cool.
it's good, but it's kind of a problem.
Well, you
Well, I like
just
the Cajun
mentioned
flavor.
that you're kind of a chef, so could you
Oh
ever?
no, no.
You said something to that
I
effect.
can I can cook.
You can cook.
I would
Okay,
not call
fair
myself a
enough.
chef.
Could you
Yeah.
ever see yourself doing a kind of a comic based on food like that, like of a chef or someone cooking or anything like that? Since you
A
haven't,
food horror.
Well, I mean, chew is food, but it's not the kind of food you actually want to eat. Um,
right?
yeah, I mean, I don't know, possibly. I have a couple of side things I'm playing with that are sort of food related.
Okay.
So maybe so.
Your next comic will be called Side Dish.
Oh, wow, that's not bad. That's not
Just
bad.
saying.
That's a
Put
chew
it down.
spinoff right there. That's a chew spinoff.
That's right.
That's pretty
So,
good.
so Rob, you were about to maybe ask a question.
Um, I don't know if it's a question really. I guess what are you guys making of, I mean, just hot topics. I mean, the whole bankruptcy of Diamond thing.
Mm.
What are you thinking about that?
I think the most interesting part is that they just got bought by a gaming company, and the CEO
Yeah.
of the gaming company said, "Yeah, we're not interested in comics." So,
Oh,
what does that mean? Like where does that
yeah.
leave the Diamond comics industry? Obviously, Diamond was also very well known for their gaming uh, arm. I think I can't remember what the name of it
Mhm.
was, but they did very good. And from what I remember reading, that was the most tempting thing for potential buyers was their
Mm.
outreach or their reach, I should say, with gaming in distribution channels. So I can see why
Mm.
Alliance was interested, especially since they're a big gaming company, and they're now just I wouldn't say a monopoly, but they're definitely bigger. But
Mm.
where does that leave the comics? Where does that leave Diamond Select Toys? Where does that leave a bunch of the smaller arms of Diamond? I don't know. And I kind of, I'm definitely interested in seeing where it goes, but I'm kind of not like, I don't have good feeling. I feel like
Mm.
I get into a point where Lunar Distribution is probably going to be the big man on campus coming soon, with possibly
Mm.
Penguin Random House being a bigger channel. So
Mm.
it's not the Wild West, It's not like every man for himself, but it's it could be very interesting in the next year or so.
Yeah.
Uh, so for the people listening to the podcast that don't know what we mean by saying diamond,
It's 13
Mm.
episodes. They know.
they should know. They
I'm
they
kidding.
better
Okay,
know.
good.
But Diamond is a comic book distributor, and in fact, when I was doing comics in the '90s, there were a lot of distributors, you
Mhm.
know. And then Diamond basically, I don't know the whole history, but ultimately became the monopoly of comic book distribution. And then when COVID hit, uh, DC made a couple of moves and sparked another, or either created
No,
or
they
joined
joined up with a smaller distributor.
small,
Mm.
and then that's been happening a lot. And then when Diamond recently said they were going bankrupt, a bunch of publishers jumped ship. The thing that was, I guess, that was kind of good about Diamond was that you could be a really small publisher and have a
Mm.
distributor, and they were a
Mm.
distributor for a lot of small publishers or self publishers or whatever.
Mm.
And whereas a lot of the bigger distributors don't have time for you, like for your piddly little, oh, you have a comic book coming out this year? That's really nice, you know?
Mm.
Whereas at least I think Diamond had room for that, you know?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel like the people who are really going to hurt are the small press publishers,
Mm.
but also at the same time, you know, it's always been a giant warning sign about, well, you have one distributor, that's not a good idea, you know?
Yeah.
That there's nothing
Mm.
really competitive about that. It's just
Mm.
whatever it is, and look what
Mm.
happens, you know? So
Yeah.
I do think in the one hand, it's bad. I do think that the shakeup of it might be really good, but I don't know
Mm.
where that goes because we're living not in the diamond age anymore, but I would call it the Kickstarter age or the crowdfunding age. And
Mm.
I think the US Post Office is probably going to be our distributor, you know, for
Yeah.
a bunch of us, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know where that goes. And it's going to cost more because bulk rates and all that stuff I don't
Mm.
really deal with, you know?
Mm.
So, and what's going to happen to the comic book shop at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Now, I, I don't really, my latest Kickstarters are not in comic shops because right now it doesn't make sense. I make more
Mm.
money off my quote cover price if I mail it to you than if I did the whole distribution and retailer cut and all that stuff, right? I'm kind of
Mm.
making artisanal comics right now, making comics that only you can get from me. Um,
Mm.
I'm not making a popular enough comic that would do well, hopefully through like, let's say an Image, you know, and the
Mm.
distribution system with the retail. So it is a
Mm.
big question mark I have of my own work
Yeah.
right now. And it's spooky and I'm trying to pay attention as best I can. Most comic book artists are terrible businessmen. Thank you, Jack Kirby. Uh, you know, and
I
so
think
we're
though,
just more interested in creating than we are in distributing. Let's put
I
it that way.
think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the difference is though is that I think it's forcing people, creators, I should say, to reevaluate how I go back to our conversation with Marty Keene, who and even Russ Kazmierzek, you know, like to a lesser degree, but I think you know people are finding ways to put their comics in people's hands. So I
Mm.
think you know this is prompting a lot more people to go, okay, well, if the traditional channels are out of the question, if they're you know out the window, what do we do to get our artwork out there? And I think that a
Mm.
lot of people are discovering new channels, Kickstarter being probably the biggest one, or any kind of
Mm.
crowdfunding site. But I don't think you're wrong when you say the U.S. Postal Service is our new biggest distributor at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And,
would agree with that.
and also, when you said before, I was talking to Dan Goldman today. Dan Goldman was in my studio and part of Activate back in the day, and he crowdfunded a graphic novel
Red Light
that's
Properties.
shipping over Red Light Properties, and it's great, and he's great. And we were talking like, okay, you have the book, now what? Now what do you do? How do you tell people about it? And one of the things that he was talking about was he's not sure he even cares about the comics industry version of trying to get your comic into people's hands. He's like, he's looking at what's inside his comic and where he can take it to other kinds of shows. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like you go to a lot of Comic Cons aren't really Comic Cons. There's some
Right.
comics, but it's got tons of other stuff.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
what other places can you go to? And then another thing we talked about was like, well, maybe your crowdfunded comic is the deluxe version, the hardcover with the bells and
Mm-hmm.
whistles and all the sexy stuff, right? And then you
Mm-hmm.
do what's considered like the soft cover and or the mainstream version, right? And maybe
Mm-hmm.
you transition that, or once you get your initial sales, then you make it more available to the quote general audience, you know,
Yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
if you could afford it and do it. So
Yeah.
there is a big change happening.
Mm-hmm.
I miss going to stores that sold just zines, hand stapled zines and Fact Sheet 5 and poetry and music. And, you know, that, how is that distributed? Somebody came by and dropped off 3 copies, is
Yeah.
how that happened. But how do you get
Mm-hmm.
it, you know, to Quimby's in Chicago or somewhere in San Francisco or all over the place? And we did have um, book distributors that did handle that. In fact, I think there's one guy who still does that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's retired, but
Tony
or there's Last Gasp. There's what's his name?
Tony Shenton.
Tony Shen. That's right. And then there was Last Gasp in San Francisco, and a couple little outfits like that where you'd find the you know the Zap comics of today. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's what because me and Dean we've been talking for like a year and a half or so. I listened to oh man, I forget what podcast you were on, but you talked about artisan comics. And that was exactly where I've been. It's like, well, obviously this seems to be where we're going. We're going toward, especially with the Kickstarters, with the Patreons, with the Zoops and that sort of thing. It's you're probably not looking at with this kind of like diffusion of attention, like everything's spread out. You're probably not gonna have a lot of books that are selling 10,000 copies. You're probably gonna have a lot of people selling 500, 1,000, maybe 2,000. The beauty of a Kickstarter or a Zoop, if you play your cards right, if you're able to kind of like market it the right ways, you can make a lot more money selling a lot less things. You can, a good example of actually a book that is super inspiring to me. I don't know if you saw Jim Afu's Kickstarter.
Yeah, I got in the mail 2 days ago.
Yeah, I just got it too. He was in town. Jim came down for the convention, so we got to hang out a couple weeks ago. And I was just drilling him for information. I was like, talk to me, tell me what happened. And it's a 48-page graphic novel. It's in single issue, beautiful book, great like hard cover, cardstock cover, beautiful stuff. And the Kickstarter was like 70K.
Wait,
That's solid.
Are you talking about his his defective comic?
Yes.
So it does help that it's a bootleg Batman comic.
That doesn't hurt.
Just like Monty Keene had a bootleg Spider-Man, and now he's doing a bootleg Wolverine. So the bootleg kind of comic is a thing. Like, you got it. I don't even.
There's the bootleg Wolverine that. Funny enough, on our show, I asked him what would be a bootleg Wolverine. He didn't mention anything about this.
Well, I actually have Jim's book right here.
Oh,
so Savage Street Vigilante.
That's right, Savage Street Vigilante. And so,
awesome.
So I think it does help to do that. In fact, I should probably. I mean, we've actually talked about bootleg comics, Vito.
Yeah.
And so there is something to it, but at the same time, like. So going back to something you just said about selling something, so like a 24-page comic in the store is now acceptable to be charged for $4 to $5, like five tops, right? Which I think is still, are you kidding me? I bought comics when they were 35 cents and 30 cents. I can't believe what happened. Anyway, and I sell my 24-page comic for $15, okay? Which I know that certain consumers would be like, go fuck yourself, Dean. I'm like, then don't buy it. That's okay. So but if I can sell my $15 comic, I still got to keep selling a $15 item over and over so I can make some rent, So what I started thinking was like, God damn it, what if it was part of my conversation with Dan Goldman today? Like, what if I was Andy Warhol and I made like a 6-foot comic book, that you could like stand in front of or like do a big thing or like just go fine art. Like just do fine art comics and then you could charge what you want because it's fine art comics. You're suddenly deciding and you're telling people, no, I'm not making a Marvel or DC comic. I'm not. Those are great too. I'm glad we have them. They also don't they sell Reader's Digest and Archie Jumbo Digest at the grocery counter? Like I'm not making that. Okay, we're already making that. I'm going to make art comics, and maybe I'm not thinking so much about issue number 49 of my series. Maybe I'm making 5 of these, like, and sell them for more money because if you respect yourself, you won't wreck yourself, like I think that's what's important to the future of artists like us, Yeah.
And there's something to the, I think having the opposite approach that a lot of bigger comic companies you're trying to get is you're going to print as many, you're going to print the demand. I think having the opposite approach and saying I'm only going to print 2,000 of these, and when they're done, they're done. This is an experience you can have, and once it's gone, it's gone. Right. I think there's something to that. I think we live in a world where everything's kind of available all the time. Yeah. You can shop 24/7. Everything's open 24/7. But to have a limited experience that when it's over, it's over. I think there's something kind of beautiful and special about that. So,
no, I was going to say I appreciate curation and artisanship. Absolutely, I totally agree with you, Rob.
I think though one thing that we can't deny, just like we can't deny AI, and the way people consume today mostly is that you can come up with a really beautiful luxury item or whatever, or something in print or something you can hold in your hand, something analog, but you can't deny that most people consume through digital. And so we just got to figure out how to monetize a JPEG, like or a PDF or whatever, and re-educate people. The worst thing the internet ever did was made it free. You buy the phone and you buy the monthly payment, but most things you see on your phone or your internet or whatever, or your laptop or iPad is quote free. There's so much content. You don't need to buy a damn thing for the rest of your life if you're just cool with whatever the content is, right? The minute you're asking somebody to buy something, we start to feel the burden of, and because we're also nostalgic, oh, I want something in my hand that I can turn pages. And that's how I grew up, right? And today's kids are like, what are you talking about? But what we need to educate and test run is, oh, can I sell you a PDF then? And then I'm not paying a printer. And the distribution is me hitting send on my computer, like to you. And hopefully you're not pirating it and sharing it with everybody else. And that's a whole other thing. But I think that in the future, which is maybe 2 minutes from now, is digital. It's the digital world. As much as I love print.
I think I can't see print going away. I think that, we definitely have to capitalize on digital sales. I mean, all my books have always done really, really well digitally. It's just, it's why wouldn't you? But, usually what ends up happening is people kind of discover it digitally, and then they'll go back and buy something nice. They'll get a nice hardcover for their shelves or whatever. I think there's always going to be a market for a really nice handmade book. I think the hard part a lot of times will be just getting it in front of people. I think if they can see it, like I've had so much success at shows. I have like special sketchbooks I've made with a local printer that'll have really nice, nice cover paper and that sort of thing, nice embellishments. And you can't get that across really well online, on my online store. But if you see it, if they see it at a con, I'm selling that sketchbook to them. Because they're just going to see it, they get to hold it, they get to feel it. That tactile experience is so underrated. So I think there's something to kind of leaning into that more. And I think the artisan thing is absolutely the way to go. Like I think it was Becky Cloonan was making some really nice, like really, really nice books. I think that's a way to go.
Absolutely. All right. Well, yeah, I'll fight that fight. I got your back. I got mine. Vito, did you freeze?
No. I'm just enjoying. I'm enjoying what. Shut up. All right, we're gonna. I feel like you're the 13th episode, but I feel like
lucky 13.
Hey, lucky. By the time we get to 52, I feel like we're gonna actually learn something, Dean.
I hope so. I'm praying. 52, that long?
Yeah, hey, maybe sooner. Until that day comes, Rob, I have to flush you down the toilet because our conversation's over. You're not going to hear it right now, but you will hear it on the Spotify version. So,
all right. Is that how you end every episode?
Thank you very much, Rob. We appreciate you coming. What are you said you have a newsletter. What is your newsletter website?
If you go to robguillory.com, it pops up. You'll be able to subscribe to it. Also on Patreon, Rob Guillory Art, YouTube, Rob Guillory Art, Facebook, same thing, and Instagram at Rob_Guillory.
All right. We're going to put all these links in our show notes for everyone to find you and bombard you with all kinds of weird Louisiana local food. Like, why didn't you say beignets or whatever?
Thanks so much, Rob. Thanks for having a conversation with us.
Rob, thank you very much. Man, it was a pleasure meeting you.
You too. Thank you, guys.
Peace.
Right. Dean, let's give it the yay and get out of here. Yay.
Yay.
Have a good night.